Right, and we're live. Here we go. Welcome to Fortean Times number 9. And this week we are talking about the little people. And we're not talking about midgets, we're talking about fairies.
Yes, the fairies. Very, very strange thing. Like, a subject that I think a lot of people think is a bit twee, but once you get into it, it opens up loads of strange avenues. People think is a bit twee.
Yeah, because I thought that. And then it's like some of it gets really, really dark, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's really right, really evil. Some of it. Because fairy. I don't really like the word fairy. Shall we call them
The Fae.
the
Is it
fae?
Fae?
Yeah,
The Fae? We're going to call them the Fae from now on.
because they're not just little beings with wings, are they? They run the whole gamut between like small, shy creatures that dislike humans, all the way up to large, friendly creatures that are good to humans. So
I think it was like, wasn't it some sort of like plot device that made them go small in literature?
yeah, maybe I wonder if they're human size to begin with, maybe. Where was the first fairy seen? I can't find out.
Was it? I got back to 1500s. I think is I found some stuff about fairies.
Is that in England or?
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember what. I don't think it was an actual report, but I think in literature they're about during the 15. Actually, when was Shakespeare doing his
That was
thing?
Was it? That's either 15. No, it must be 1790, I think.
Oh, was it? So it's
1790.
before that then.
Yeah, I just wonder whether they're around like really ancient times, like cavemen times, whether there was some kind of nature spirit there, and maybe they appeared in a different guise to them. Maybe they just appeared as balls of light or
Well, you had
glowing
the
beings.
but like I mean, the Greeks must have had like woodland spirits and stuff, mustn't they?
Yeah, I suppose I didn't look into that.
Because
Yeah,
you got like Pan, haven't you? The satyr and things like that, haven't you?
yeah. I suppose ancient Egypt they had sort of things like that as well, didn't they?
Yeah.
I couldn't find much about England. Most of my stuff I found was in White was the Welsh stuff because every single district there it's always a bit different, isn't it? And so I think we've got to be talking shapeshifters here. I think if everyone in different districts are seeing different shaped people, different shaped fae, they must be shapeshifting. But what are they real? What do they really look like?
Well, where was the?
That'd be
Hold on. If I get the Wikipedia up, I looked at the little Wikipedia for little people, and then you have. So you have the Native American people. The Native Americans had their own race of little people who lived in the woods. So the Aztecs had their own little people. The Inuits, the Iroquois, the Cree.
Aborigines. They
Yeah,
had them, didn't they?
Putwudgie. Is that Wampanoag? Who are they? Is that more Indians? Is it?
Ah, is that Aborigines? Nah, I'm sure the ancient,
It does it by tribe.
the American.
I think they're all Native Americans. Who else do we have? And obviously in our mythology we have fairies, brownies, dwarves, gnomes. Tommyknockers were a type of fairy, weren't they?
Yeah, they were in the Welsh mines. Yeah, the old Tommy knockers. Yeah, or they
Yeah.
called them the knockers. The knockers in Wales, down in the mines. Yeah, I wouldn't have fancied meeting one of them down in the mine. Like,
So
pitch dark.
were they pretty were they nasty then? Were they or?
Yeah, I think you had to avoid the knockers. Yeah, I think they foretold like disaster. They'd knock on the seam of the rock of the coal when it was just about to collapse and that. So maybe they were good though. Maybe they were warning people. It's
Yeah,
hard to tell. Isn't
oh,
it?
here you go. In Cornish folklore, the name comes from knocking on the mine walls, as happens just before cave-ins. Usually, the
Yeah.
creaking of the earth and the timbers giving way. To some miners, knockers were malevolent spirits, and the knocking sound was them hammering at walls and supports to cause the cave-in. And then others said they were just practical jokers.
Yeah, it's the thing, isn't it? It's tricky to know what's it's like Mothman, isn't it? People say Mothman was evil, but other people say Mothman was trying to warn about that bridge collapse, and so yeah, they definitely seem to appear
Well,
when something bad's going
if you're
on.
always around just before something kicks off, you could go either way, couldn't you? Oh, apparently they're also called knackers.
Well, the knockers were knackers.
The knockers were also called the Tommy knockers were also called knackers.
Maybe you're knackered if you see one or something. You're about to be knackered if you see one. The mine's going to fall on your head.
In the 1820s, the Welsh and Cornish miners took Tommy knockers to America. So in Pennsylvania, you had Tommy knockers and things like that. Some got called Cousin Jacks. Cousin Jacks is notorious for losing tools as they were for diving out of shafts just before they collapsed.
I have actually seen a fairy. I know I mentioned before I saw a gnome, but that's not fun. That's not funny. But I did actually see a fairy, like a beautiful female fairy, not too far away from where I'm sitting now, just in these woods.
Did you hear the music? Because apparently you hear music with them as well, don't you?
I've had the silence before, the Jenny Randall's Oz factor, when everything goes quiet and like you think something's going to happen, but every time I've had it a few times. Every time it's gone silent, nothing's happened. So
that can only be a good thing.
I was just walking through these woods. They're not very big woods, and I wasn't looking for fairies or anything. And I just turned my head and looked at the tree, and there was this beautiful like woodland fairy like formed from the bark of the tree, and that just sort of like undulated for like a few seconds, and I thought, bloody hell, it's a proper fairy in this tree trunk. And then of course I looked again and it was gone. Odd.
Well, that's what they're supposed to be like, aren't they? If you take your eyes off them, they disappear, don't they?
Yeah. You ain't seen one then?
I haven't. Although I'm a believer, I've never actually seen anything.
Yeah. So you might not you specifically, but people might have seen like a wisp going in the woods. They might have seen like a wisp of something out of the corner of their eye, just missed it, sort of thing. Yeah, I think they're definitely there. Yeah.
And then obviously they're related to the leprechaun as well, aren't they?
The elves as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we start into kind of actual lore, let's talk about. Did you want to talk about the Cottingley fairies and get that one out of the way?
Yeah, it's a bit embarrassing for old Conan Doyle, wasn't it? Yeah.
He didn't detect that one, did he?
He was supposed to be like Mr. Big, weren't you, in the old psychic investigations? Yeah, but although I suppose back then, I suppose maybe I'd have believed it. I don't know. Photography was sort of still sort of in its infancy, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean they obviously look like cardboard cutouts, don't they?
Yeah, that's the trouble, isn't it? Yeah.
Because even didn't the girls say they were all real except for one? There's one last picture that they said was real. The rest of it was faked.
Well, no, that really odd one who's doing that little dance with his leg in the air.
Yeah.
That gnome one, yeah, gnomish sort of one, yeah. What a strange time that must have been like.
Conan Doyle was obviously a believer because he was also a member of the Fairy Investigation Society as well.
Oh, was he? Yeah.
So you got the fairy. So in 1927 they created the Fairy Investigation Society. I think it died for a bit and then it came back. So it's still about today. You can actually email them.
Yeah, I looked at their website. Yeah, there's not much on their website, is there? We should do some magazines or something.
They need to do something like that, or a snappy website, or just like a tell your own story section in like a forum or something. Like that's what they need, like a forum in there or something like that, don't they?
Yeah, maybe it's just like one bloke doing it or something.
Yeah, it does seem to be kind of a one-man band thing. So in 1955 to 1956, they did the Great Fairy Census. Here you go. Here's some of the famous members. Walt Disney was a member of it.
Oh.
And also,
what did they get up to then?
I don't know any of the others. Don't know the others, but there was a woman called June Kynaston who was the author of Nude Dancing for Health.
I saw that dodgy right-wing nudism stuff, innit? Nudism movement. Well, it might dodgy, I don't know.
Like the old Rambler.
Yeah, the old naked Rambler.
Rambler.
Yeah. Is he still going? Is he? Yeah.
Oh wait, he's either out or he's in prison. I think that's just pretty much how his life goes now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think he's having a bit of autism going on there or something.
Yeah, he's a good old-fashioned English eccentric, isn't he?
Yeah, but I suppose in Ireland and Iceland, people still believe in fairies, like really seriously, don't they?
I think is it in it's like the Nords. They still heavily believe in gnomes, don't they? Because I've read stories before where like diggers have just stopped in their tracks because there's like because there's a gnome there.
Don't build on a fairy path or dig up a fairy fall. Abuse a fairy bush or tree. Nah, definitely. Bad idea.
Where's that park where they've like cut the little doors and windows into the trees so it looks like the fairies live there? Have you ever seen those pictures?
It's somewhere in England, isn't it? Yeah.
Is it somewhere in London or something?
You can buy them on Amazon, can't you? The fairy doors, yeah. Just give them a little home, yeah. It's just a parallel. I love parallel worlds, and fairies are the sort of ultimate parallel world, aren't they? Just really, really strange.
Yeah, because it's so then you've got the what they called changelings, haven't you?
Oh, changelings, yeah. Wouldn't want one of them.
So what happens when the changeling grows up, or does it disappear, or what?
Apparently, because I say it differs with different districts. Like some, I think in Ireland especially, the changeling's really ugly and deformed, isn't it, with a sort of a hunchback and like pretty useless, really. But in Wales, apparently, fairy and human offspring were sort of like quite beautiful looking. They were light and fair, and like just like us, really.
Oh, I found the Wikipedia. So it says a changeling typically identifiable via a number of traits. In Irish legend, the fairy may appear as sickly and won't grow in size like a normal child, and may have notable physical characteristics such as a beard or long teeth. A little baby with a beard, that'd be fucking strange, wouldn't it?
I think in Ireland there was a custom where to stop your baby being swapped with a changeling, they'd get a tree trunk and sort of carve a baby and like stick it in the cot instead of the baby, and stick the baby somewhere else, so the fairies would come unstuck. Really, they'd try to swap their child for a tree trunk or a carved tree trunk. Strange what people do, isn't it? Like, I mean, obviously they must have believed it.
Some people must have done it, mustn't they?
I don't know if it's so strong in Ireland now, but Iceland, they really believe in it, unless they're just doing it as a sort of holiday tourist thing. But I don't suppose many tourists go to Iceland. I don't know. I suppose they still do it.
Oh, so it says here, it says beauty in human children and young women, especially traits which evoke brightness or reflectivity, such as blonde hair, blue or silver grey eyes, are said to attract fairies, as they perhaps find preciousness in these perceived traits. But this is pretty dark. In Scottish folklore, children might be replacements for the fairy children in the Tithe to Hell, which is best known from the Ballad of Tam Lin. According to Scottish myths, a child born with a cowl, a part of the amniotic membrane across his or her face, is a changeling and soon will die.
Oh, yeah,
is a fey birth. Yeah.
Calls are freaky, yeah.
Yeah.
I just love this whole parallel world aspect of it, because they're also called the gentry, aren't they? The fairies in the secret commonwealth, like a whole secret world of like with its own kings and queens and princes and feasts and that. And apparently that idea dates back to Shakespeare's A Midsummer's Night's Dream. Or that sort of parallel secret commonwealth. Yeah,
that's seen as like that's when fairies kind of changed a bit, wasn't it? With that.
And that's that whole strange sort of period with John Dee and everything, and Shakespeare's putting this fairy land in the British side, and John Dee around the same time he's creating the British Empire. And there was a lot of weird occult stuff going on back then. Very few. I haven't seen much written about it. There's a few things, but I mean, they were just like occultists, weren't they? All these like Queen Elizabeth II, Queen Elizabeth I, Shakespeare, and that. I mean, he was plugged into it. John Dee. And what an odd thing! Like, was the British Empire created by magic and maybe with the help of the fairies? Who knows? But
Yeah. Yeah, because it's
Apparently
like when they're stealing all these babies, they've got to take them somewhere, haven't they?
that's like the whole alien abduction thing. That a lot of them say that the abductees are having been impregnated by aliens, and maybe they're fairies in a different guise.
What, did fairies used to stick things up people's butts?
I don't know. I haven't actually read anything of it, but I suppose you'd keep quiet about it back in them days. I suppose, yeah. But female abductees claim to have had phantom pregnancies where they're abducted and they get inseminated by an alien or some hose pipe or something. They are actually pregnant, apparently, but a couple of months later, the pregnancy disappears, as if someone's whisked it away. I mean, that's fairy stuff, isn't it? Really?
Well, that's another thing from abduction stories, isn't it? Where they go, they're on the ship and you get an alien woman shows the man a young child and says that it's his, don't they?
Yeah, and they sort of in the subsequent abductions, they're sort of the baby's like stuck in their arms, isn't it? As if they've got a sort of bond with it and sort of teach it stuff. In Wales, like the offspring of a human fairy baby, that was actually the cause of a lot of fights in the country fairs, where like someone who was light and fair would be pointed out. They'd sort of go like, he's a changeling, he is, and that was renowned for starting like big fights at the Welsh country fairs.
I wonder if that's kind of like some sort of racial memory, and that's kind of why gingers get the rough end of the stick. I wonder.
Gingers are a bit. I don't want to insult gingers, but yeah, I mean, it could be some sort of. Maybe they originally were alien. Not alien. I can't stop saying that. Fairies and a fairy human. Not a race, but maybe they're sort of the descendants of that. They haven't quite got bred out the fairiness. But although I haven't heard of any ginger fairies, I'm sure there's some Irish fairies with ginger there.
I'm sure they insist they're strawberry blonde.
Yeah. We'll have to mention the haunted gong. I mentioned it at the end of the last show. But
the haunted gong. What's that?
I hate coming out with all these anecdotes because I get paranoid. People think I'm making it up, but it's all true.
It was really in my mind.
Yeah, it's like people think, he's making all this stuff up, but this stuff doesn't happen like every day. I'm not living in some like freaky cartoon world. It only happens like about once every 6 months or so. But while we're on the subject of fairies, I'll tell my haunted gong story, but I have to. About 2005, I think. My mate, who was a musician, because I was collecting cymbals and gongs at the time, and my mate came round and said, "I've got this gong for you." I thought, "Oh yeah, let's have a look." And that looked like that was about 16 inches in diameter. It looked a bit like one of those holiday tack gongs you get by on holiday. It looked like a crap one, but I gave it a couple of bangs, and that was actually quite a good one. And he said, like, the only thing wrong with it is like there's a bite out of it. You know, like a gong is like, I don't know what you call it.
They're brass.
They're
brass at least, aren't they?
Brass and copper and mix, isn't it? But there's the flat surface, and then it's like hammered round to an edge, so there's an edge round it. And there was a little sort of bite bite out of it. It looked like, just as if like a little creature had taken a bite out of it. And I thought that was odd, and because he knew more about gongs than me, and he said like if a gong's damaged, that's the best place. It's a kind of the best place for it to be, really, because it won't affect the sound. And I thought, oh yeah, I bought it off him, and I didn't think much about it, and then I was doing some track or something, so I was banging it quite a lot, and I was banging it for about 15 minutes, and then I thought, there's lots of there's like hundreds of tiny little transparent creatures running across the floorboards, and I thought, nah, that's not is it? And then I sort of kept banging it, and then I thought, no, there are lots of transparent creatures. You couldn't like see them, but you could see them. It's hard to explain. It's as if you were seeing like if a plane goes through the clouds, that leaves a sort of trail behind it. It's like that's what you could see, and I thought that's a bit odd. And I got a bit scared, so like I stopped banging it, but then I sold it to my friend. But I didn't tell him about the transparent creatures.
Yeah.
I sold it to my friend, and like a couple of weeks later, he sort of, I saw him again, and he said like, "What's that bloody gong you sold me? Like every time I bang, I see these transparent creatures on the floor." And he was seeing exactly what I was seeing, and that's the haunted gong. It's still hanging on his wall. Yeah, I should buy it back, really. But
Well, you don't want to know what they are, do you?
it's just like maybe they're fairies. I don't know. But
Maybe they were there anyway, and the gong just showed them up.
possibly, yeah. I got the feeling that must have been used in some sort of ritual or something to call these things up. But I think that happens a lot, like haunted objects. When people buy them from auctions or that. I mean, we don't know what they've been used for, do we? So that's not really. It's getting off the topic of fairies.
Well,
but,
I had a friend, and it was a couple that me and my ex used to know, and she swore blind that she had little people in her house, but she was kind of scared of them, and it was like almost like it was something they very rarely talked about, but it was like almost like they were like under siege from these little people because they'd never actually mention them when they were in the house or anything like that.
Yeah,
So
people don't do it. It's the British sensibility, We don't talk about it.
Well, it was almost like she felt if you mentioned them or highlighted them that they'd do something like nasty.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing not to give them power by thinking about them. Yeah, but British people are so strange like that. I knew a couple in ages ago in the 80s, and I was actually in the same house. They were doing a Ouija board in the loft. And they didn't tell me what was going on, but I was actually in there with other people getting stoned in the room below, and they did it. I don't know why I can find stuff funny, but I find it funny. But they were doing this Ouija board, and then everything went really bad, and she started talking in a man's voice and stuff, but they wouldn't believe it, sort of thing. And they do a Ouija board, and then this woman, she was a nurse actually. She started talking in a man's voice, so like when they were driving around in the car and that. But they just sort of like brushed it off, sort of like they didn't want to believe it.
Yeah.
And it got so bad until eventually they had to take it to a priest, I think. And it's the British sensibility, We don't want to know, do we?
Well, there was some girls at my school that were the same sort of thing.
Ouija board. I've never done a Ouija board. I stay away from Ouija boards. They are just freaky things. Really odd things. Just a bit of cardboard with a few letters, but that causes so much weirdness.
Yeah. So it's like I think there was a group of girls at my school did one, and they ended up having to go to the local priest about it because it was really like fucking them around.
I know another guy who did one. Him and his mate, I think they were at school as well, and they got all this like Latin. They did it for about a week, I think, and like right at the end, they got this like Latin text come through, and they took it to their. They wrote it down as it was being given to them, and they took it to the RE, the religious education teacher.
Yeah.
And he said, like, handed him this bit of paper with all this Latin on it, and he said, like, the religious teacher read it, and then his face went white, and he just sort of like really like, oh my god, where'd you get this from? And like,
oh shit,
that's fucking freaky, isn't it? Like, have you ever done a Ouija board?
No, because they scare me shitless.
Now they scare me. I'd never do one.
I wouldn't.
You're opening doors.
Yeah. It's like throwing the old front door opening in probably more like doing it in an inner city centre, isn't it?
Yeah. That's why I tell people, it's like you wouldn't go down to like the dodgy area of town to like the dodgy pub, but yet you open these doors to these like dodgy, bad part of town spirit world, don't they? When you're doing that stuff, people are so odd, aren't they?
Speaking of dodgy spirit world, do you want to talk about the island of Iona? Where's that?
Yeah, the Iona.
Yeah, where's that?
Stay away from fairy mounds.
Yeah.
Stay away from fairy mounds.
So what
did I go for it?
I haven't got.
Oh, you do it.
I haven't actually got any details. But on the island of Iona, there's a fairy mound, isn't there? And
famous one, yeah.
And the one that I found, there was someone who used to apparently hang around. Hold on, I can't find it. But there was something.
Nora Fornario was her name, wasn't it?
There was another one. I read one about a vicar as well. So more. It's apparently like quite a common thing, isn't it?
The fairy mound in Iona's got a lot of history of witchcraft and things like that. That was in 1929 when she was an occultist, Nora Fornario. She was found near the fairy mound on the island of Iona, naked, with bloodied and swollen feet, but sort of with a strange cloak wrapped around her and a knife in her hands.
Yeah, I've just found this. 17th of November 1929 it was.
Yeah, she was a member of the Golden Dawn, or the offshoot of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Apparently she'd used the knife to carve out a crude cross out of the peat, over which she was found, with a look of abject terror on her face. Sort of dead, kind of like. And she was 33 years old, and that's the freaky number, isn't it?
33.
She spent her time walking around Iona and like going into these weird long trances, and which last for days. And her former housekeeper was quoted in the Scotsman as saying, several times she said she had been to the far beyond and had come back to life after spending some time in another world. Well, she went there completely, didn't she? Eventually.
Yeah, because what they're saying on this website is that the fairies could be the pagan dead.
I think that's what a lot of so-called demons are. I think, yeah, just like ancient ancestors, yeah, like worshipped back in the olden days, and just they've gained power from the attention. Like energy follows attention, and now people think they're demons, but I think they're just us, yeah, just our ancestors. That silver jewellery turned black overnight, which was probably a bad omen, I suppose.
Oh, or you bought some shit.
The vicar, I think you're thinking about Robert Kirk, aren't you?
That's the one I'm talking about, but that wasn't Iona, was it?
No, that was in Aberfoyle in Scotland in 1692. Yeah, he was actually found dead on a fairy mound.
Yeah, because apparently he used to like sit in there listening to the music or something, didn't he?
He'd lie on the fairy mound with his ear to the ground and listen to the fairies and that. On Doon Hill.
If you listen to this story here, this is Mr. Noy, a farmer in the district of Berrien, became lost and bewildered on the moors at night, a common motif in fairy folklore, which may be an embedded code in the story for the protagonist entering the altered state of consciousness necessary for interacting with a supernatural reality. Noy is missing for 3 days before being found by a search party sleeping in a ruined bogie, Cornish term for a cowshed. on Selina Moor with his horses and dogs tied up nearby. Incredulous at the passenger time, he was convinced he'd spent no more than a few hours sleeping. He tells the story of what had happened to him after becoming disorientated on the moor. After finding himself in an unknown stretch of woodland, he heard music and saw some lights way ahead in a clearing. So here you go. This is where you start getting the UFO similarities, don't you? Missing time.
Yeah. If anyone's interested in the similarity between fairies and UFOs, read Jack Vallee's Passport to Magonia. He sets it all out. Yeah, really good book that is.
So here's his story. So he says that his dog slunk back, and the horse wasn't willing to go on. So he tied him to a tree, took his course through an orchard towards the lights, and came to a meadow where he saw hundreds of people, some seated at tables eating and drinking with great enjoyment apparently, and others dancing reels to the music of a tambourine, played by a damsel dressed in white who stood on a heaping stock. A heaping stock. I don't know what a heaping stock is. Just beside... Do you know what one is?
No, I don't know what that is.
I'll tell you. Just beside the house door, which was only a few paces from him. The revellers further off were all very smartly decked out, but they seemed to him, at least most of them, to be a set of undersized mortals, yet all the forms and tables with the drinking vessels on them were all in proportion to the little people. The dancers moved so fast that he couldn't count the number of those that footed jigs and reels together. It almost made his head giddy only to look at their quick and intricate whirling movements.
Yeah, the whirlwind, yeah. That happens a lot in the Welsh stories, yeah.
Also, it says the damsel turns out to be Grace Hutchins, an old flame who had died 3 years before after getting lost herself on the moor. Removing Noy from the fairy Neville's, Grace warns him, "Embrace not, nor touch flower nor fruit, for eating a tempting plum in this enchanted orchard was my undoing." People believed, and so it seemed, that I was found on the moor dead. It was also supposed that I must have dropped there in a trance, as I was subject to it. What buried for me, however, was only a changeling, was only a changeling or sham body. Never mind, I should think, for it seems to be that I feel much the same as when I lived to be your sweetheart. So
he was like an involuntary a fairy abductee, weren't he?
Yeah, so it seems that do you think there was some sort of like rip, or the veil between the two worlds was like thin there or something?
The fairies dancing in a ring, creating a kind of psychic whirlwind. That's mentioned a lot. Yeah, so it's as if they're creating some. I hate that word, interdimensional portal, but yeah, I think that's what they're doing, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's interesting. That he was a involuntary one, but this woman we just talked about, and Robert Kirk, they were voluntarily. That seemed like they were voluntarily like going to these fairy mounds and actually listening. No, physically listening for the fairies, because that's why apparently that Robert Kirk, the Reverend Robert Kirk, was killed, because he'd revealed, he'd listened, he'd be lying on the ferryman, like gathering all this knowledge, and he wrote that book, The Secret Commonwealth.
Yeah,
quite a famous book in fairy lore, and that's why he was killed, because he revealed their secrets. And apparently he's buried at the graveyard at the foot of this hill where he used to lie listening to the fairies, but people say his body isn't in the coffin because there's just stones in it, because the fairies took him away, whisked him off to fairyland.
Well, maybe
punish him, I suppose.
Maybe that body, unless he knew enough and he managed to get himself a passport to the land of the fairies.
Yeah, maybe he's having a good old time there.
Following that other story, it could be a changeling body in there, couldn't it?
My God, yeah. Apparently, Robert Kirk first met the fairies earlier when he was the parish minister at Balquidder at a Fairy Knowe, which is Scottish for Fairy Knoll, like just behind the church. So, if you want to go, if anyone wants to go look for fairies, go there.
Oh, how about this one then? It says, my grandmother, Marie Lebras, has related to me that one evening an old fae arrived in my village, Caduliac, Finisterre, that must be, I think, not quite sure what this is, and asked for hospitality. That was about the year 1830. The fae was received, and before going to bed she predicted that the little daughter, whom the mother was dressing in night clothes, would be found dead in the cradle the next day. This prediction was only laughed at, but in the morning the little one was dead in her cradle, her eyes raised towards heaven, and the fae who had slept in the stable was gone. So that could be a changeling then, couldn't it?
Yeah, well, like you say, there's a definite connection or similarity between alien and fairy abductions. There's always like strange lights and some sort of mind or perception manipulation and missing time. That's just the same as the fairy, all happens with fairies, but it happens with aliens as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They've got to be the same thing, haven't they? Like just appearing in different guises.
Well, it seems they've changed with the times, doesn't it? Because before they used to be dress in like very plain clothes and things, didn't they?
Red and green, weren't it? Like red and green jerkins and that. Yeah.
Yeah.
God, I don't want to come out with another anecdote, but I've just remembered another thing that happened to me when I was a child. Oh God, I got to say it now, bloody hell. But when I was like about 9 or 10, I used to play with my cousin and his friends. That was like, if you can imagine, like occupied houses in a square, but the house in the very middle of the square was like derelict, and we used to play in there, and that as kids do. And I swear to God, one day we were playing in there, and suddenly this other sort, he's like slightly older, about 16 or 17. This other guy was there, dressed like Robin Hood, with like chamois leather, like red and green, like chamois leather.
Yeah.
And he had this like star. This sounds crazy, but this did happen. But he had this like star in his hands, and he was like throwing it up and catching it, and that's it, really. You know, just a strange thing. Not much to say about that, but yeah, just I'm sure loads. I can't just be me who has these strange experiences. I think everyone does, but they forget it, or they sort of dismiss it, kind of thing. Like when we're children, you know, like playing as children do. I'm sure loads of people have stuff like this happen.
Yeah, because they do seem to appear to children, don't they?
Just like I say, this British thing, we don't seem to give it any credence, do we? Another thing about the fairies, when they're all partying together, having these revels with these dancing and feasts. I mean, that's very similar to the medieval witches' Sabbath, isn't it? Like, as if there's some kind of connection to that as well. And then you've got the fly agaric toadstools. Like fairies have always been, well, at least since Victorian times, fairies are depicted next to or sitting on fly agaric toadstools. So,
Those are the red ones with the spots?
Yeah,
on them?
the scary red and white ones. Yeah,
yeah.
I did some once. Yeah, it didn't seem to work, but I just ate them raw. But I chopped them up and we ate them raw. But apparently that's not. If you want to do, I shouldn't say it really, but don't do this at home, kids. But if you are going to take fly agaric mushrooms, you've got to slice them really fine and stick them in the oven on a low heat for about half an hour, and that makes some sort of chemical change occur. And just eat a little bit until you start tripping. And I'd stay away from the old fly agarics.
Yeah,
I know people have done them and said they've had a good time on them, but that's dangerous stuff. But fly agaric toadstools, witches' sabbaths, that's suggesting that there was some sort of drug sort of subculture where I don't know, you took fly agarics and you entered the witches / fairy realm, the other world, and that begs the question that were some of the witches' familiars actually fairies, kind of thing. You know, the old witches' familiars. Maybe they were fairies. There's some sort of ancient folklore thing that we've sort of lost touch with.
The fairies are magical. I mean, maybe the witch had something over the fairy or something like that.
Yeah. And then we got the elf bolts. Let's get on to the elf bolts.
The elf bolts.
The elf bolts, the fairy arrows that are found all over Britain, and people were saying like they're small triangular flints known as Bellarmites. Actually
Yeah.
found in a lot of countries, but especially in Scotland. And people believe that these were like the arrowheads shot by the elves, which usually like killed cattle when they were used them to kill cattle for some reason. The old elf bolts.
Yeah, I've read some. I can't remember which creature it was, but they used to like upsetting cows, didn't they? I think
Witches used to
fairy.
curse cows. They were into cursing cows, weren't they? I'm gonna curse your fucking cow, you know. I suppose that was quite heavy though, cursing someone's cow back in them days.
Yeah, if you kill the cow before they can eat it.
Like a year's worth of bloody meat, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's not only that; it's your milk supply as well, isn't it?
Apparently, if you find an elf bolt near your cow, you can cure it by touching the cow with the elf bolt, which it was supposedly been hit by, and then you give it water to drink. That you've dipped the arrow into it, but I don't know. That gets a bit sort of like yokel cider stuff, doesn't it? Like out their heads on cider and sort of all that stuff. A lot of this folklore. Innit? I love folklore, but a lot of it is kind of like people like getting a bit creative with the truth, isn't it? But associated with elf bolts are elf locks in hair, where you'd find your horse kind of like with a knotted hair.
Yeah.
They said that was like an elf lock. Like the elves had like locked it into knotted their hair. It's a sign of being pixie led. And the horses are ridden by the elves or the fairies to exhaustion. Yeah.
Oh, here's a
if you're a human,
I found a thing about
if you're a
fairy
human,
theft after you finished your bit.
just like if you wake up and you've got a knot in your hair, like an elf lock in your hair, that's supposed to be a sign from the fairies that you're being dirty or lazy, because the fairies like cleanliness. But yeah, it's the old elf locks. Yeah.
Because didn't the what they call brownies? Didn't they used to clean the house, or they were horrible to people who didn't have a tidy house?
Yeah, they punish people who didn't clean their houses. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is a bit much, really. But yeah.
So it says the elves have got a worse name for stealing than they deserve. So far as taking things without the knowledge or consent of the owners is concerned, the accusation is well founded. They neither ask nor obtain leave, but there are important respects in which their depredations differ from the pilferings committed among men by jailbirds and other dishonest people. The fairies do not take their booty away bodily, they only take what is in called Gaelic the torad, i.e. the substance, virtue, fruit or benefit. The outward appearance is left, but the reality is gone. Thus, when a cow is elf-taken, it appears to its owner as it's suddenly smitten by some strange disease. In reality, the cow is gone, but only its semblance remains, animated as it may be by an elf, who receives all the attentions paid to the sick cow, but gives nothing in return. The seeming cow lies on its side and cannot be made to rise. It consumes the provender laid before it, but does not yield milk or grow fat. In some cases it gives plenty of milk, but that milk yields no butter. If taken up a hill and rolled down the incline, it disappears altogether. If it dies, its flesh ought not to be eaten. It is not beef, but a stock of alder wood, an aged elf, or some trashy substitute.
Oh God, that's mental. That is like,
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah,
That happens a lot in the Welsh stories. Like the fairies were known to steal things, like they steal little like objects from the house, and obviously also unbaptized babies. I forgot to mention that. Like when a baby's swapped for a changeling, they're usually unbaptized. So if the fairies are like stealing stuff, maybe there's like big stashes of treasure like hidden in caves or something.
Well, that must be why you get the stuff like the leprechauns and their piles of gold and things like that.
Yeah, because in the Welsh stories, they often appeared like in two or three fairies would appear in broad daylight, kind of thing, and they'd talk to you. And
yeah,
they didn't like to be touched. But
in the fairy
they talk to you, but
oh, sorry, after you.
I was just going to say they appeared in broad daylight and they talk to you, but they don't like to be touched. That's in Wales anyway.
What, do they disappear when they're touched?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, don't like being touched.
The other thing is they disappear as soon as you turn your back on them as well, don't they?
Yeah, fleeting little things. Yeah.
Little buggers, aren't they?
There's a good story I read the other night from there. And this guy, that was at the full moon, where obviously it's like when they appear more often, and when the fairies dance in their circle and make this whirlwind,
Yeah.
and obviously don't go too near it, because if you go too near the whirlpool, like if you go too near the UFO, they throw a charm over you, which like makes you invisible to any companions, and you'd have to live with the fairies for the rest of your life.
Well, this reminds me of. Have you seen much of the 411 stuff? The missing 411.
Oh yeah, that's freaky stuff. Isn't
Did
it?
you
Yeah.
did you ever read that story where the guy said he was there? They couldn't find him, but they found him very near to somewhere they'd already searched. But what
Yeah.
happened was the bloke said he was there, he was shouting, but no one could hear him.
Yeah, that's that phenomenon, isn't it?
So that's very, very similar to that, isn't it?
There's a terrifying one in Wales. I think that was like in the 1800s, where like there was this family in the garden, and suddenly this young son was like whisked off up into the air, and he was saying like, "Help me, help me!" And he was only like 6 foot in the air, but no one could see him.
Yeah.
And he's going like, "Help me, help me! They're taking me away!" But no one could see him, And then he just disappeared, like fucking terrifying, yeah.
Bloody fairies.
Yeah, it's like pretty heavy stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't go near a UFO or a fairy whirlwind. That's like
Watch
the
out for
moral of
it.
the story, isn't it?
Well, I wonder if this kind of bleeds into the. Do you remember the green children that were found in? Is it Woolpit? Was it?
Oh yeah, the green children.
They said they were taken away by a whirlwind, didn't they?
I don't know about that. Yeah, because that's only about 20 miles away from Rendlesham Forest, isn't it? Where they appeared from. Yeah.
Oh, is it? I thought it was. I always thought it was in
Rendlesham Forest. Yeah.
I always thought they were found in like Cornwall or something. But it's actually.
It's Woodbridge.
Oh, it's the other side.
Suffolk,
Oh, it's the other side. Is that where?
No, Woolpit in Suffolk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Woolpit. Well, they used to. It's named Woolpit because there was a big pit where they used to throw the wolves and kill them. Like,
Oh, yeah.
it's 20 miles away from Rendlesham Forest. Yeah.
Well, Peter Pan kind of follows all the fairy myths, doesn't it? You've got your kind of secret commonwealth there, haven't you? You've got your. Do fairies have a
fairy,
lifespan?
isn't he?
Yeah.
Peter Pan's a fairy, really.
Well, he was kidnapped, wasn't he? So he was. So he was.
Monst.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose. I don't know. If you ever get pulled into a fairy dancing circle whirlwind,
Yeah.
or if you're foolish enough to run into one on purpose,
Yeah.
you'll be instantly surrounded and concealed from view from your compatriots. So, in Wales, anyway, if you're stuck in a fairy whirlwind, you have to be got out before the cock crow at dawn, and then if that happens, you're all right. Apparently, like there's no harm done. But how they got people out of the fairy world, well, that's not funny. But it's not funny if you're in a fairy whirlwind, but it seems funny talking about it. But if you're stuck in a fairy whirlwind, you have to have like two or more strong men. You stick a long stick of mountain ash into the middle of the circle. So when you sort of dancing around in the fairy whirlwind, you come round and like grab the stick of mountain ash, and then you get pulled out by your mates, kind of thing. Because
Sounds like fun.
Fairies don't like mountain ash for some reason.
Well, isn't ash what you're supposed to kill a vampire with as well? It's funny how the same sort of substances keep cropping up over and over again, isn't it?
Yeah, mountain ash and hawthorn, isn't it? Hawthorn stakes, yeah. Why wouldn't they like mountain ash? Because they're not supposed to like rocky places either. Or in England and that, fairies aren't supposed to like rocky places, but they must like rocky places in Iceland. So
Well, they don't have much choice, do they? I suppose But I suppose they've adapted, like the Galapagos tortoises and things like that.
Yeah, I suppose they adapt to their surroundings.
Adapt to the environments, don't they? But I know the Scandies are very.
What about contact and fairies?
How do you?
Is it wise? I don't think it's very wise, is it?
They're not exactly truthful.
I was
from what I've
told
read.
by. Yeah, I think you got to have your wits about it. Yeah, but I was told like if you want to contact the fairies, it's all to do with the second sight. So they say it, but I don't know what people mean when they say the second sight, because I suppose they mean like seeing from your third eye, I suppose. But
Yeah, I
you
was
got
going
your
to say it
first
must be the
sight, I
third
suppose,
eye.
haven't-
The third eye's in the middle of the forehead, isn't it?
Yeah, but I was told like if you want to see fairies, go out into the woods, or before that you've got to like subtly shift your visual focus by staring into a mirror, but not staring into a mirror, but you kind of like subtly just change the way you look, kind of thing. And apparently you can see your aura in the mirror if you do it right. And,
It sounds like Douglas Adams is describing flying, doesn't it? You just got to
yeah,
throw yourself at the ground and miss.
I like the idea though, like subtly sort of changing the way you look. Like I don't know if you go cross-eyed or whatever, or just sort of like defocus.
Well,
Maybe.
that's another thing that's kind of ubiquitous across the paranormal, isn't it? Is the mirror, isn't it?
Yeah, the old mirror. Yeah,
You got things about vampires can't be seen in mirrors. Was it cover all the mirrors cover all the mirrors when you have a dead body in the house?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just portals to this other world, like Ouija boards, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not too keen on mirrors myself. No, I don't like having one sort of around. Yeah, I don't cover them up, but yeah, they are freaky things, really. Because ghosts are often seen in sort of like portal type shapes, like doorways and windows, aren't they? And I suppose a mirror is like the ultimate portal, isn't it? Because it reverses everything, doesn't it? And it's just the thing that if you do weird things happen. So if you've got like a piece of glass mirror that's reversing everything, it's like that devil's toy box, isn't it? But I made one of them once.
What's it? I don't know what what is
The
a
devil's toy box. It's like a cube. You get like six small mirrors and stick them together into a cube. So it's like a box with like all on the inside is mirrored, so it like stretches into infinity.
Yeah.
And people have made them and said they've heard like screams coming out of it and that. But I made one. I didn't hear any screams coming out of it. But the one I made, I used mirror tiles, but they had like curved corners, which is I think that fucked it up a bit because it's not like.
Is it like a sacred geometry thing as well? Then is it?
Yeah, because if you get 6 like mirror tiles and form them into a cube, if you look into it, that stretches into infinity.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty weird thing because if you've got one in your room, like everything's normal, but then you've got this devil's toy box there, which is like very unnormal. It's just like in the midst of all the normality. And,
so do you actually close? Do you actually close it up? So you literally put
you
mirrors
seal it
around?
up, yeah. And people say people use them for EVP experiments and things like that. But I've never had any weird stuff happen with mine, but I've still got it actually. Yeah, it's in my bedroom. Yeah.
But
there's some good videos on YouTube about him. A lot of them are probably like bullshit ones, but it's a good freaky phenomenon.
Creepypastas are quite good these days, aren't they? Some of them are quite convincing.
Oh, I love creepypasta. Yeah, it's great. Isn't it? There's sleepover party rituals. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, Bloody Mary.
My favourite one was that one. Do you remember that creepypasta about that kid that watched that really weird, kind of slightly creepy kids program?
I didn't see that one. No.
Ah, great! And the reveal at the end is like the kid was just sat in front of the TV screaming at white noise.
Oh God, yeah. Have you heard of the Midnight Man? That's a really good one. You do this ritual. You call the Midnight Man.
Yeah.
I think you stick pins in the door or something and say like, "Midnight Man, come and visit me," and you have to like sit in the corner or something. And that's great. Yeah. Look up the Midnight Mask. It's a great little scary thing. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like the Slender Man. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah.
We're getting a bit off topic here, but
I've run out of notes on the old fairies.
oh, have you? Is that why? Is that why? we'll freeform for a few minutes then. I mean,
I just
do you think
love creepypasta.
Do you think the Slender Man could be a tulpa?
Weird one, isn't it? Got those kids to murder their mate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or stab their mate. Well, she survived, didn't she? But
yeah,
tulpas. Tulpas like the elephant in the room, aren't they? I think they're created every day, but like I say, we don't, or people generally don't want to believe it, do they? But it's true.
Well, that's what I wonder about Slenderman, whether he's kind of like a mass tulpa.
Well, it was created as a sort of tulpa, wasn't it? It was created as an online competition, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To create a scary thing, and then, of course, everyone gets into it, and energy really does follow attention. So if you've got all these people putting their attention on this Slender Man, they're feeding that energy, and it's either gonna create itself, or some sort of demon type thing is going to hijack the sort of thing that's there, this sort of like raw chaos force type figure that's there, and take it away. Yeah. Now I forgot what I was going to say now. Tulpas, yeah.
I did actually find a bit about a fairy funeral.
That sounds good, yeah.
So this person says, they say, but fairies die too. Those that living in the fairyland on Selena Moor. This Selena Moor sounds like quite an interesting place, doesn't it?
Where's that?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't. I think it's West Country. I think somewhere. We're not immortal, according to Grace Hutchins' testimony. There is a relatively common folklore motif of fairy funerals or burials, which might muddy the waters on the theories that the fairies are the dead. William Blake, a firm believer in the world of the fairy, previously claimed that to have observed the fairy funeral, where he saw a procession of creatures, the size and colour of green and grey grasshoppers, bearing a body laid out on a rose leaf, which they buried with songs and then disappeared. So here's another one from Cornwall. Richard beheld the bier born between 6, whether men nor women he could not tell, but he saw the face of the corpse was that of a beautiful female, smaller than the smallest child's doll. It was, Richard said, as if it were a dead seraph. So very lovely it did appear to him. The body was covered with white flowers, and its hair, like gold threads, was tangled among the blossoms. The body was placed within the altar, and then a large team of fairies with picks and spades began to dig a little hole close by the sacramental table.
That's what? God, I'm choking. That's wild, that is, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just get this in. If anyone's interested in fairies, check out Robert Kirk's The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns and Fairies, 1815. There's W.Y. Evans Wentz, The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries, 1911. And there's probably more pertinent to us is Janet Board's The Traveller's Guide to Fairy Sites.
There's also, I'm pretty sure you can find witness testimony if you look up the Fairy Investigation Society.
They do investigations.
I don't think they do investigations, but they did that census in 55 to 56, and I think they've put some of it up. There's some great little stories about. But I could read a couple of bits from the. I'll read a couple. So, 4 men who wished their names and addresses to be withheld thought they saw some wee folk near a large drain in Lincolnshire. The time was early evening, and the sun was setting and casting reflections in the water, which at that period of the year was high and reached the top of the long grass at the sides. This made them wonder whether they were victims of optical illusion, but the only reputation being that not only one but all 4 of them were able to observe these creatures whose clothes were of various colours: red jerkins, green breeches, yellow jerkins, mauve breeches. In the height, they were approximately 9 inches, and both bodily and facially bore resemblance to humans. On seeing the 4 men who were traversing the path near the water's edge, the little people darted into a nearby mustard field.
That's wild, that is, yeah.
Yeah, where is it? Trying to find the shorter ones. One very still evening about the year 1921, while sitting on a seat in Westcliff, Essex, with her 2 sons, aged 9 and 11 respectively, Mrs. FMA Southwell could hardly believe her eyes when she saw a number of gnomes in a large tree. They were about 7 inches high and were very busy gesticulating and pointing to each other, completely unaware of the human trio in their vicinity. The little creatures and their clothes were colourless, yet the jackets appeared darker than the trousers. The latter seemed in one piece with the soft-looking shoes they wore. They also had some kind of headgear. The tree was very old with many branches, but the gnomes seemed to be treading on air between, underneath and above the branches. Miss Southwell did not fear them at all, yet did not find them attractive. I kept opening and shutting my eyes, she said, in case it was an illusion, but they were absolutely distinct. During this time she had been sitting in an amazed silence. Then the 9-year-old child said, "Let us get away from here." "Why?" she asked. "I seem to see little people in that tree." Mrs. Southwell then turned to the other boy. "Do you see anything?" "No," he answered. He told me. So far I had not said that I had seen the gnomes. I found it curious that one, not the other, of my boys had seen them.
Oh, I love it, yeah. Great stuff. That's this other world, isn't it? It's got to be... there's another world, isn't there? Just beyond our senses that sort of like... interacts with us sometimes. It's probably interacting with us all the time, but we filter it out. But
I don't know whether it's when you catch it unawares, or whether that's when they appear.
So that's when I saw that fairy in the tree. I was just like, I wasn't trying to do anything. It just happened. I wasn't trying. Yeah.
But not.
That's when these things happen.
I was saying more like not you, them. When you kind of catch them off guard.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Because if you're going out, like these like feral ghost hunters, as people call them, they're not going to find anything. Feral ghost hunters, yeah. They go out and just like no spirit's going to interact with them, are they? They're just a bunch of idiots, aren't they? But
yeah, that's right.
I just love this other world. It's true, isn't it? Like people call it the spirit world or the astral plane or the other world, but it's real. It's a real thing. It's like flying dreams, isn't it? Like flying dreams. So when I have a flying dream, I flap my arms like a bird, and then I go straight up. Every time I have a flying dream, I flap my bloody arms like a bird, and I go straight up. And every flying dream I've had, I fly over a sort of populated area, so like people can see me flying, and they're all pointing up at me and going, "Oh, look, he's flying," and I'm going, "Yeah, it's pretty good, isn't it?" And I don't know what's going on there, some sort of Freudian thing. But every dream I have to like show off that I'm flying.
I'll tell you, I usually find when I'm having a flying dream, as soon as I realise I'm dreaming, I crash. I don't know what that says about me.
All the best dreams I've had like that, I always bloody wake up like right at the bloody end of it. I met the Magic Mushroom King once. I was walking along this country road in this lay-by, and then the Magic Mushroom King appeared. He was all dressed in black, and he had like this silver brooch on his lapel, like the Magic Mushroom brooch, and and he was the Magic Mushroom King. And I was just going over to see him, and then I bloody woke up. Every time I wake up, like, right when it gets good,
Yeah. It's when you kind of. I don't know whether those kind of dreams are kind of made to almost wake you up, because you realise what's going on, and then that's the point at which it slips away, isn't it?
That's the whole thing of lucid dreaming, isn't it? Where you sort of force yourself to keep doing it. But I've never had much success with that. But
no,
I've got here in.
I had a go at astral projection. I just couldn't get on with it.
Yeah, the thing with astral projection is like. Is very unnatural. Is that when you sort of like imagine your separate astral body?
Yeah.
Like you imagine it and then transfer your consciousness to it. Yeah, I think that's a very unnatural thing to do. And,
well,
funnily,
I always imagined it was more like you're like crawling out of your body. is the way I
Yeah.
kind of imagined it. But I just couldn't get to that bit of getting out of the body. I could get to kind of being aware of it, but that was where I was stuck.
I think it's too weird to try and like imagine your separate astral body and then transfer your consciousness.
I think the thing is, if you think about it, I think that's probably when you can't do it.
Yeah. There's a chaos magic technique that's really interesting, where you don't visualize like a separate astral body and try to transfer your consciousness into it. But that's when you sit down or lie. Or it's preferable to sit down. You close your eyes and then visualize in your mind's eye everything that's in front of you in the room.
That's the one I tried and I couldn't do it.
Yeah, but you keep doing it until you can like visualize everything in front of you with your eyes shut.
Yeah.
And apparently, eventually, you'll be concentrating on a point in the room, and then you'll just be there. You just be there out of body, like instantly, like that kind of. That's an interesting technique. Yeah.
I don't know whether for me whether it's because I'm trying to apply a scientific method to something that's like ethereal.
Yeah. You seem to be more of a skeptic than a believer, I think. Or not a skeptic in a sort of like ignorant way, but I'm a believer, as the monkeys said. Monkeys sang once. I'm a believer. So it's just like, I don't know. Like I say, if you do weird things happen, and it's just whatever they are. You know, it's tempting to say it's all just a creation of ourselves, a creation of the subconscious mind, but I don't think it is. I think a lot of these so-called entities or whatever are like independent sentient beings. I don't think they're parts of, you know, stuff we've created or parts of our subconscious we've visualized or anything.
Well, that's kind of
that's
part of imprisoning us, though, isn't it? Insisting that this stuff doesn't exist.
We're not allowed to think of these things, are we?
No.
The old control system, yeah.
Well, it's like when you watch the evening news and they talk about this stuff, you get the old X-Files music on, don't you? Don't you?
It's like the funny thing at the end of the news broadcast, isn't it? Yeah. But the thing is, the people are telling us that they're bloody doing this stuff, aren't they? Like behind the scenes, yeah.
Probably are. They're probably going to Eyes Wide Shut parties and all sorts, aren't they?
Well, they are, yeah. Oh, that's another thing. We'll have to get onto that in the next show. That Eyes Wide Shut parties, yeah.
We'll have to, we'll have a conflab after this and work out what we're doing next week. So we have done.
I might have a guest for next week, actually. Yeah, interesting guest. Yeah.
So we might have a guest next week. So
I can't. Yeah.
Go on then. What are you going to say?
I won't say what his name is because I don't know whether he wants to be anonymous or not. But yeah, that'd be a good show. Yeah, if he comes on. Yeah.
Right. So. This is the end of this week's. We will decide what we're doing next week, and we'll try and let you know through the. Don't forget, there's the Telegram t.me/Fortean words. You have my other podcast, Dope Movies and Shows. I'm sure you'll find me somewhere else on the internet as well. And that's it for this week. Good.